Before anything is understood, before belief tries to organize itself into conclusions, let the body arrive. Not arrive somewhere new, but arrive here where breathing is already happening without instruction, where awareness is already present without effort, where nothing is being asked of you. There is a quiet strain many people carry that they rarely name, a sense that something within them knows what is true, what is right, what is meant, and yet life does not seem to reflect it. You may feel it as a dull pressure behind the eyes, or as a subtle impatience with yourself, or as the feeling that you are always almost aligned, but never quite settled. This is not failure. It is not lack of faith. It is not that your ideal is wrong. It is something much subtler. The core realization that must gently emerge by the end of this transmission is this: faithfulness to an ideal is not holding it in thought. It is remaining internally congruent with it when nothing appears to be happening. Most people think they lose their ideal when they stop thinking about it. In truth, they lose it when they stop being faithful to the inner state that the ideal represents. Faithfulness has been misunderstood. It has been treated as effort, as persistence, as mental discipline, as emotional intensity. But faithfulness, in its deepest sense, is not active. It is relational. It is the quality of how you remain when your ideal is not being confirmed by circumstances. This is where most people unknowingly break alignment, not through doubt, but through quiet inner contradiction. They say they believe, but their body prepares for disappointment. They say they trust, but their attention keeps checking. They say they are faithful, but their inner posture says, not yet. And life responds not to words, but to posture. Scripture hints at this with great precision, without ever explaining it psychologically. Be it unto you according to your faith, not according to your desire, not according to your effort, according to your faith. Faith here is not optimism. It is not belief in possibility. Faith is where you stand internally, when the outcome is not visible. Neville Goddard understood this, but it is rarely emphasized clearly enough. He spoke of living in the end, of assuming the wish fulfilled, of remaining faithful to the imaginal act. But the word faithful was often heard as persistent thought. It is not. Faithfulness is non-contradiction. It is the absence of inner behavior that denies what you say you believe. This is why ideals collapse so easily, not because they were unrealistic, but because the nervous system never learned how to remain loyal to a state without external reinforcement. The nervous system is honest. It does not respond to affirmations. It responds to consistency, consistency of safety, consistency of orientation, consistency of identity. If your ideal represents peace, but your body remains braced, you are not being unfaithful morally. You are being incongruent somatically. And incongruence creates delay, not punishment. Delay is simply the time it takes for inner contradiction to resolve. This is why faithfulness feels difficult, because it is not about doing something. It is about not doing something that you have been trained to do for years, not checking, not correcting, not leaning forward. The ideal is not sustained by attention. It is sustained by residence, a small grounding moment. You decide something is true, and later notice you are no longer rehearsing it. Another, you imagine an outcome, and your bummy stops scanning for signs. These moments are faithfulness in action. They are quiet. They do not feel spiritual. They feel ordinary. And ordinariness is the signature of alignment. Christ never taught people to strain toward the kingdom. He said, the kingdom of God is within you, not within your thoughts, within your orientation. Orientation answers a simple question. Where am I standing right now internally? Are you standing in trust or in preparation? Preparation is subtle. It feels responsible. But preparation is faith with an escape route. True faithfulness has no escape route. Not because it is stubborn, but because it is settled. Settledness is what allows ideals to incarnate. Incarnation is not mystical. It is psychological. An idea becomes flesh when the body stops treating it as hypothetical, and the body stops treating something as hypothetical only when it experiences consistency. This is why staying faithful is not about intensity. It is about duration without contradiction. Neville hinted at this when he spoke of persistence. But persistence was never repetition. It was remaining in the state long enough for it to feel normal. Normal is the goal, not excitement, not certainty. Normalcy. When your ideal feels normal to your nervous system, life reorganizes around it naturally. This is why so many people say, it happened when I stopped trying. They did not stop caring. They stopped contradicting. Contradiction looks like this: imagining, then doubting, trusting, then preparing, believing, then checking. Each contradiction teaches the body, this is not safe yet. Faithfulness teaches the opposite. Faithfulness says, two, I will not leave this state just because nothing is happening yet. This is not blind belief. It is fidelity to identity. Your ideal is not something you want. It is something you are aligning yourself to be. And being cannot be rushed. Being stabilizes through experience. This is why time appears necessary. Not because time creates the ideal, but because time allows the body to stop arguing with it. Staying faithful does not mean repeating the ideal. It means living your life without behaving as though the ideal were absent. Another grounding moment. You move through your day without referencing the desire internally. Another. You respond to situation from calm instead of urgency. These are acts of faithfulness, not dramatic, decisive. When Neville said that the imaginal act must be faithful, he meant that your inner life must stop telling a different story than your words. Inner life includes posture, tone, pitch, breath, attention. This is why faithfulness is embodied. You cannot fake it. The body always reveals the truth of what you believe. If the body is anxious, faith has not yet settled. This is not failure. It is information. Faithfulness does not shame the body. It allows the body time to adjust. Adjustment happens through consistency, not pressure. This is where Christ-centered mysticism and psychology meet seamlessly. Abide in me. Abide does not mean think about. It means remain. Remain where? In the identity that does not waver, based on appearances. Appearances lag behind identity. They always have. This lag is what tests faithfulness, not as punishment, but as confirmation. If you leave the ideal during the lag, you were never faithful to it, only interested. Interest fades. Faithfulness remains. Remaining does not feel heroic. It feels quiet, sometimes boring, sometimes empty. But emptiness here is not absence. It is space without contradiction. And space is fertile. Life fills space that is not being managed. This is why ideals come true when they are no longer being chased. Chasing implies distance. Faithfulness collapses distance. You are no longer trying to reach the ideal. You are allowing yourself to stand as it, standing as it changes behavior. Behavior changes environment. Environment reflects identity. This is the law Neville trusted. Not imagination as fantasy, but imagination as assumed identity. If you stay faithful to your ideal, you will not need to force it. Force is a sign that faith has been replaced by effort. Effort is not wrong. It is simply unnecessary at this level. Faithfulness is passive in appearance, but absolute in effect, because it does not waver. Wavering reintroduces delay, not punishment. Delay. Delay ends the moment contradiction ends. This is why the fulfillment often feels sudden. It was not sudden. It was prepared quietly while you were learning how to stay. Stay without checking. Stay without correcting. Stay without preparing for disappointment. Preparation is the opposite of faithfulness. Faithfulness says, even if nothing changes today, I will not leave who I am aligning with. That sentence is not spoken. It is lived, and life responds to what is lived. As this settles, you may notice that the ideal feels less charged, less urgent, less emotionally intense. This is not loss of desire. It is embodiment. What is embodied does not need excitement. Excitement belongs to anticipation. Faithfulness belongs to presence. Presence is where manifestation occurs, not because you demand it, but because nothing in you blocks it anymore. Let the cadence slow now. There is nothing to apply, nothing to remember, nothing to hold. Just notice where you are standing internally when you are not trying. That is your real state. If that state matches your ideal, it cannot fail to come true. Not because you deserve it, but because there is no longer a contradiction preventing it. Remain faithful not to the outcome, but to the state of being your ideal represents. The rest will unfold without strain, without urgency, without effort. And when it does, it will feel natural because it was never something you had to earn. It was something you had to stop leaving. Rest here. This is faithfulness, and it is enough. And let this faithfulness deepen without becoming deliberate. Deliberateness introduces effort. Effort reintroduces tension. Tension fractures the very state you are learning to remain within. True faithfulness is effortless because it is not performed. It is revealed in what you stop doing. You stop rehearsing explanations for why it hasn't happened yet. You stop adjusting your inner posture to accommodate disappointment. You stop making space for an alternative identity, just in case. This is not rigidity. It is coherence. Coherence means the same inner stance remains, whether the outer world confirms it or not. Most people believe faithfulness means holding on, but holding on tightens the body, and a tightened body cannot receive. Faithfulness, in its truest form, is relaxed loyalty. Loyalty to a state of being that you no longer abandon when circumstances fluctuate. This is why the ideal must be understood correctly. An ideal is not a picture of the future. It is a way of being now. If your ideal is peace, faithfulness means returning to calm, even when life gives you reasons not to. If your ideal is abundance, faithfulness means remaining internally sufficient, even when resources appear constrained. If your ideal is love, faithfulness means staying open, even when old defenses are tempted to close. These are not moral challenges. They are neurological ones. The nervous system was trained by past experience to associate certain conditions with safety. Faithfulness retrains that association. It says, I will not leave my inner ground just because the environment has not caught up yet. This is not denial of reality. It is fidelity to identity. Identity is the axis around which experience organizes. When identity is unstable, experience mirrors instability. When identity is settled, experience rearranges accordingly. This rearrangement does not require belief. It requires time without contradiction. This is why faithfulness feels like waiting. But it is not waiting for something. It is waiting as something. Waiting as peace. Waiting as wholeness. Waiting as sufficiency. Waiting here is not passive. It is generative. It is the soil, allowing the seed to complete its unseen work. You cannot see roots growing, but they are growing precisely because you are not looking. Looking pulls energy upward. Faithfulness allows energy to move downward, downward into embodiment, into posture, into tone, into breath. This is where ideals take shape. Neville understood that imagination must become feeling, but feeling was never emotion. Feeling was familiarity. When something feels familiar, you do not monitor it. You live from it. This is why staying faithful often feels anticlimactic. There is no surge of inspiration, no wave of certainty, just a quiet refusal to return to the old inner stance. And that refusal is powerful because the old stance was the delay. You were not delayed by circumstances. You were delayed by the subtle habit of leaving your ideal internally. Leaving looked like discouragement or overthinking or preparing explanations. Faithfulness ends leaving. And when leaving ends, there is nowhere else for life to go but toward alignment. This is why Christ spoke so often about endurance. Not endurance of hardship, but endurance of being. He who endures to the end shall be saved. Endure here does not mean suffer. It means remain. Remain who you are aligning with, even when appearances suggest otherwise. Salvation here is not rescue. It is completion. Completion of division. The division between who you are inside and how you live outside. When that division closes, life has no resistance. Resistance was never external. It was internal wavering. Wavering drains energy. Faithfulness conserves it. This conserved energy expresses itself naturally through right timing, right speech, right movement. You do not plan these things. They arise. This is why the faithful do not rush. Rushing implies that something essential is missing. Faithfulness knows nothing is missing. This knowing is not conceptual. It is embodied. You feel it as steadiness, as patience without effort, as calm without suppression. This calm is not indifference. It is strength without tension. And from this strength, your ideal has no choice but to appear. not because you forced it, but because nothing in you contradicts it anymore. Life mirrors consistency. If you stay faithful to your ideal, not in thought, not in words, but in inner stance, it will come true, not suddenly as reward, but naturally as expression. And when it does, you may hardly notice the moment it arrives, because by then it already felt like home. Stay here, not waiting, not hoping, simply being loyal to who you have chosen to be before the world agreed. This is faithfulness, and it is enough. And as this loyalty to being continues, notice how it does not require vigilance. You are not guarding your ideal. You are not defending it against doubt. You are not reinforcing it with reminders. You are simply no longer stepping away from it. This is the subtle shift that changes everything. Before, faithfulness may have felt like effort because it was mixed with fear. Fear that if you relaxed, you would lose ground. Fear that if you stopped thinking about it, it would dissolve. But now something quieter has taken over. You are discovering that what is real does not disappear when unattended. Only what is imagined as fragile needs protection. Your ideal, when truly chosen, was never fragile. What was fragile was your relationship to it. And that relationship is stabilizing now. Stability does not announce itself. It reveals itself through absence. The absence of inner debate, the absence of emotional bargaining, the absence of subtle self-betrayal. Self-betrayal rarely looks dramatic. It looks like compromise with doubt. It looks like lowering expectation internally to avoid disappointment. It looks like preparing explanations. Instead of remaining aligned, faithfulness ends these habits without confronting them. They simply fall away because they are no longer needed. This is how healing actually occurs, not through confrontation, but through irrelevance. The old patterns become irrelevant when the identity they served is no longer occupied. You are no longer occupying the identity of someone waiting to become. You are occupying the identity of someone being. Being does not rush. Being does not plead. Being does not perform. Being rests in itself. This rest is what Scripture calls trust. Cast your burden upon the Lord. Not because the burden is too heavy, but because the burden was never meant to be carried by effort. The burden was the effort itself. Once effort dissolves, what remains is clarity. Clarity about what matters. Clarity about what does not need attention. Clarity about where you stand. Standing is the key word. Faithfulness is not holding an image. It is standing in a state, and standing does not fluctuate with mood. You may still feel emotions. You may still experience uncertainty, but these move through you rather than relocating you. They do not define your position. This is maturity of faith, not faith that denies human experience, but faith that is not displaced by it. You are no longer asking life to confirm your ideal before you live from it. You are living from it first. And life is responding not dramatically, but quietly through small alignments you may only recognize later. A conversation that shifts tone, a decision that resolves itself, an opportunity that appears without pursuit. These are not signs to watch for. They are consequences. Watching for them would reintroduce dependency. Dependency belongs to the old identity. The new identity does not need reassurance. It is self-consistent. Consistency is the language reality understands. Not words, not affirmations, not declarations, consistency of being. This is why faithfulness is so powerful and so misunderstood. It does not look like effort. It looks like normalcy. Normalcy is magnetic. The world reorganizes itself around what feels settled. And what feels settled is what you no longer try to improve. You are not improving your ideal. You are inhabiting it. This inhabitation is quiet enough that the mind may try to overlook it. Do not rush to name it. Naming is not required. Just notice how little you need to convince yourself now. Notice how the ideal feels less like a future event and more like a present orientation. That is the shift from event to orientation, from outcome to identity. Once that shift completes, time becomes irrelevant. Not because nothing happens, but because you are no longer using time to negotiate your worth or your direction. You are no longer measuring days by progress. You are living days from coherence Coherence is its own reward, and it is also its own cause, because what is coherent within cannot remain unexpressed without. This is the law Neville trusted, not because he believed in it, but because he lived it. Faithfulness was never about hoping harder. It was about staying when nothing changed, staying when the mind questioned, staying when emotion fluctuated, staying without tightening. You are learning that now, not as a rule, as a natural settling. Let it continue without comment. There is nothing to conclude yet. Just remain faithful to the inner stance that no longer abandons itself. That stance will carry you the rest of the way, without effort. And as you remain, notice how even the word faithful begins to loosen. Not because faithfulness is ending, but because it no longer needs to be named. At first, faithfulness feels like something you must remember, a posture you must return to, a choice you must make again and again. But when it becomes embodied, it stops feeling like a choice. It feels like home. Home does not require loyalty. You do not stay loyal to home. You simply live there. This is the quiet transition that marks real integration. You are no longer being faithful to your ideal. You are being faithful from it. The ideal is no longer ahead of you. It is behind your eyes, beneath your breath, informing the way you stand in the world, without asking permission. This is why effort continues to fall away. Effort belonged to the distance between who you were and who you were trying to be. That distance is closing, and as it closes, the nervous system relaxes further, not into passivity, but into trust. Trust is not a belief about the future. It is a sense of internal safety in the present, safety that does not depend on outcomes. This is the safety Christ spoke of when he said, "Do not be afraid," not because danger would never arise, but because fear was no longer needed. To navigate life, fear was replaced by orientation toward what is stable. And what is stable is not circumstances. It is identity anchored in being rather than in results. When identity is anchored this way, circumstances lose their power to define you. They still matter. They still affect you, but they do not relocate you. You do not leave yourself to deal with them. This is the essence of faithfulness, not clinging to an image, but refusing to abandon yourself when the image has not yet appeared. Abandonment was the true betrayal, not betrayal of the ideal, but betrayal of presence. And presence is what you are no longer leaving. This is why time begins to feel different now. Time is no longer something you endure on the way to fulfillment. It becomes the medium through which fulfillment expresses itself. You are not waiting for life to begin. You are living inside it. This changes everything quietly. You may notice that decisions come with less friction, that you no longer rehearse conversations as much, that your body feels less hurried, even when your schedule is full. These are not techniques working. They are signs of inner unity restoring itself. Unity does not eliminate complexity. It eliminates division. Division was what made life feel heavy. The division between what you wanted and how you lived, between what you believed and how you braced, that division is healing. And healing is not dramatic. It is structural. Structures change slowly, then suddenly feel obvious. One day you realize you are no longer arguing with yourself. You are no longer negotiating your worth internally. You are no longer explaining why something hasn't happened yet. Those explanations were a form of self-protection. Protection is no longer needed. This is the point where faithfulness becomes invisible. And invisible faithfulness is the most powerful kind because it does not depend on mood or memory or motivation. It depends only on residence. You reside where your ideal lives. And because you reside there, you do not need to defend it. Life recognizes residence. It always has. Reality reorganizes itself around what is consistently lived from, not what is occasionally imagined. This is why Neville said, "Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled." Assume means take up residence. You have been doing that not by force, but by staying when it would have been easier to retreat into old habits of doubt or preparation. That staying is the unseen work. And unseen work always precedes visible change, not as reward, but as reflection. You are not creating the future. You are allowing the present to express itself fully. And expression cannot be stopped. Once inner contradiction has ended, This is why there is nothing left to push, nothing left to improve, nothing left to convince. Your ideal does not need your effort. It needs your fidelity to being, and that fidelity is already happening. So let the cadence slow even more now. Let the words become less important than the quiet recognition beneath them. You are not becoming faithful. You are discovering that you never stop being. You simply stop leaving, remain here, not as discipline, not as practice, as life itself, living you, if you stay faithful to your ideal. In this way, not in thought, not in strain, but in inner stance, it cannot fail to come true, because it is no longer something you are reaching for. It is something you are living from, and life always confirms what is lived from consistently. Rest in that. Nothing more is required. And now, let even the idea of continuing fall away, not because something has ended, but because nothing here needs momentum anymore. What you have been listening to was never meant to carry you forward. It was meant to let you stop moving internally. So what was already true could finally settle. Faithfulness, as you now feel it, is no longer an action you perform. It is a quiet absence of betrayal. You are no longer betraying your ideal by living as though it were absent. You are no longer betraying yourself by preparing for a reality you do not actually inhabit. That preparation has ended. And when preparation ends, life no longer meets resistance. This is the moment Neville trusted more than technique. The moment Christ pointed to more than doctrine. The moment psychology recognizes as integration. Integration is when nothing inside you is arguing with who you are choosing to be. No arguing, no bargaining, no contingency plans. Just a settled orientation. From here, nothing dramatic is required. You will not feel elevated. You will not feel certain in a loud way. You will simply feel unmoved by the absence of immediate confirmation. And that unmoved quality is the most faithful state possible. Faithful not because it is strong, but because it is no longer reactive. Reaction was the old loop. Reaction kept pulling you out of alignment. The moment circumstances fluctuated. No, fluctuation does not relocate you. You remain. This remaining is not passive. It is deeply alive. You will still act, still choose, still respond, but you will do so from the same center, regardless of outcome. This is why your ideal can now come true, not because you deserve it, not because you earned it, but because nothing inside you is preventing it anymore. Prevention was never conscious. It was subtle self-abandonment, and self-abandonment has ended. As you move back into ordinary life, into sound, into movement, into responsibility, carry nothing from this. Do not try to remember it. Do not try to repeat it. What has been recognized does not need to be revisited. It will express itself naturally in how you pause, how you speak, how you wait, how you move without strain. This is how faithfulness lives, quietly, consistently, without needing attention. And because of that, your ideal will not need to be chased. It will meet you where you are already standing. You have stayed, and that was enough. Rest here. Life knows the way forward now. And now, allow this to come gently to rest, not as a conclusion you reach, but as a truth you stop moving away from. Nothing more needs to be held in mind. Nothing needs to be practiced, protected, or proven. What mattered has already taken its place beneath effort, beneath language, beneath intention. You did not make faithfulness happen. You simply stopped abandoning yourself, and that was enough. Your ideal no longer stands in front of you as a promise. It stands beneath you as a ground. You are no longer walking toward it. You are living from it. From here, life will respond in its own quiet ways, not as reward, not as spectacle, but as coherence expressing itself outwardly. You may notice changes only in hindsight. A calm where urgency once lived, a steadiness where doubt once negotiated, a natural unfolding where force once strained. These are not signs to measure. They are echoes. You do not need to listen for them. Remain as you are now, unimpressed, unhurried, undivided. This is what it means to stay faithful. Not faithful to an outcome, but faithful to the inner stance that no longer leaves itself when nothing is happening. From this stance, your ideal does not need effort to arrive. It comes true because there is nowhere else for life to go but into alignment. Let the words fade. Let the stillness remain. You are already living from what you once hoped for, and that is the quiet completion. You were never meant to force. Rest. Before anything is understood, before belief tries to organize itself into conclusions, let the body arrive. Not arrive somewhere new, but arrive here where breathing is already happening without instruction, where awareness is already present without effort, where nothing is being asked of you. There is a quiet strain many people carry that they rarely name, a sense that something within them knows what is true, what is right, what is meant, and yet life does not seem to reflect it. You may feel it as a dull pressure behind the eyes, or as a subtle impatience with yourself, or as the feeling that you are always almost aligned, but never quite settled.